Have you ever wondered if the safest place in a child's life could become the scene of a horrific tragedy? A warm home, a mother's embrace, gentle lullabies. All can conceal a secret so terrifying it sends shivers down a community's spine. On a quiet Thursday afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, September 15, 2024, an urgent 911 call shattered the peace of the suburban Cascade Heights neighborhood. A woman's voice, trembling and choked with sobs, cried out, my child is missing. Please help me." But behind those tears lay a story that no one, not even the closest neighbors, could ever have imagined. Cascade Heights, a middle-class residential area in southwest Atlanta, is known for its oak-lined streets, charming red brick houses, and the friendly atmosphere of a close-knit community. Here, children ride bikes on sidewalks, families host weekend barbecues, and church bells echo every Sunday morning. But that day, around 4:37 p.m., as the sunset bathed the leaves in golden light, an Atlanta Police Department patrol car quietly pulled up to 1423 Oakwood Lane. It was the home of Tamika Johnson, a 29-year-old single mother, and her son Jeremiah, who was just 18 months old. Neighbors gathered on the roadside, whispering, their eyes filled with worry. They were used to seeing Tamika, a black woman, with a radiant smile pushing Jeremiah in his stroller every afternoon. But today, something was wrong. Very wrong. Police officers entered the house, a two-story home with white windows and a neatly trimmed front yard. Inside, everything seemed normal. Children's toys scattered on the living room rug, an unused diaper on the kitchen counter, and the faint smell of baby formula in the air. Tamika sat huddled on the sofa, her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I only looked away for a moment," she told the officer, her voice hoarse. "I put him down for a nap, then went out to the backyard to make a call. When I came back, he wasn't in his crib anymore." Her words were punctuated by sobs. The officer, a white man named Daniel Harper, took careful notes, but his eyes clearly showed suspicion. The front door was locked, and there were no signs of forced entry on the windows. An 18-month-old child unable to walk. How could he disappear without a trace? As the search team began to comb the area from the bushes in the backyard to the trail near the park, the atmosphere in the neighborhood became oppressive. More neighbors gathered, some carrying flashlights, even though it wasn't fully dark yet. Mrs. Evelyn, an elderly woman living next to Tamika, shook her head. "I've never seen anything like this here. Little Jeremiah was so lovely, always smiling when I waved from the fence." But a few others whispered different stories. They spoke of nights when Tamika let Jeremiah cry for hours without comforting him, of times she appeared tired with bloodshot eyes, or loud arguments with a strange man in the front yard. "She's a single mom. It must be hard," one person said, as if to justify it. But in their voices there was a hint of unease. As night fell, the flashing lights of rescue vehicles flickered throughout the neighborhood. Police officers, all white, went door to door, asking questions and checking neighbors' security cameras. But there was nothing unusual, no strange cars, no suspicious people, no noteworthy sounds. In Tamika's house, the atmosphere grew heavier. Officer Harper returned to question her again. "Are you sure no one entered the house, Ms. Johnson? Did anyone have a key, or know you left the baby alone?" Tamika nodded, but her eyes avoided his gaze, her hands clutching a crumpled tissue. "I don't know," she repeated, her voice fading. "I just want my son back." But the truth, like a dark phantom, was lurking somewhere within that very house. A small detail that no one noticed, a tiny dry mud stain under the sofa, inconsistent with the spotless floor, would soon uncover a horrifying secret. Jeremiah wasn't missing. He hadn't left the house. And Tamika, the mother crying for help, knew that better than anyone. What happened in the few hours before that 911 call would shock Atlanta and then the entire nation. This wasn't a story of a kidnapping or an accident. This was a story of a mother, a moment of losing control, and a cold-blooded crime hidden behind tears. The question hung heavy in the air of Cascade Heights that night. What could drive a mother who should be a child's safest refuge to destroy the very life she brought into the world? As the officers left the house, the streetlights illuminated Tamika's tired face, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes glinted with an emotion no one could read: fear, guilt, or absolute emptiness. In just a few more hours, the truth would be revealed, and it would make this entire community never look at each other the same way again. Atlanta, the city of dreams and hope, was about to face a nightmare no one would forget. Cascade Heights. Atlanta was a place where people believed they could build a good life. Red brick houses with manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, and the sound of children's laughter echoing from playgrounds made it seem like a perfect picture of the American dream. But behind that peaceful facade, every family had their own stories, unseen pressures. At 1423 Oakwood Lane, Tamika Johnson, a 29-year-old single mother, and her 18-month-old son, Jeremiah, lived a seemingly ordinary life, but one that harbored unseen cracks. Tamika was a petite black woman with curly hair tied back neatly, and a smile that had once endeared her to neighbors. She worked part-time at a nearby Kroger supermarket, where she was always cheerful with customers, though sometimes her eyes betrayed weariness. In the eyes of the Cascade Heights community, Tamika was a devoted mother. Neighbors often saw her pushing Jeremiah in his stroller around the neighborhood every afternoon, the boy sitting quietly, his big round eyes observing the world with curiosity. Jeremiah was an adorable child with tight curly hair, a gummy smile, and babbling that made anyone passing by stop to gently pat his cheek. That boy was the joy of the whole neighborhood, Mrs. Evelyn, the elderly neighbor, once said. She became withdrawn, talking less to neighbors. Mrs. Evelyn noticed that Tamika no longer took Jeremiah for walks as often as before. Instead, she often stayed indoors curtains, drawn even on beautiful sunny days. Some nights Jeremiah's cries could be heard from the house, lasting for hours without Tamika comforting him. "I thought she was just tired," Mrs. Evelyn told a friend. "Being a single mother isn't easy." But some others whispered about loud arguments. A few times they saw a tall, unfamiliar man appearing in Tamika's front yard. The arguments often took place at night, with shouting and slamming doors. "I don't know who he was," a neighbor named Sarah recalled. But every time he came, Tamika looked much more stressed. Tamika's work also suffered. Her manager at Kroger said she often called in sick, unexpectedly, usually citing Jeremiah's illness. But colleagues noticed Tamika becoming increasingly absent-minded, sometimes standing blankly at the cashier's counter as if her mind was elsewhere. A co-worker on the same shift, LaToya, once asked, "Are you okay, Tamika? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." Tamika just gave a weak smile, replying, "I'm fine, just a little tired." But LaToya didn't believe her. She said Tamika started saying strange things like, "Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing anymore," or "Being a mother is much harder than I thought." These words at the time seemed like the lamentations of a young mother, but later they became haunting clues. Another detail that puzzled neighbors was the appearance of strange packages. An Amazon delivery driver recalled delivering several large boxes to Tamika's house, but she always asked him to leave them at the gate, not to bring them inside. "She looked anxious, kept looking around as if afraid someone would see," the driver recounted. No one knew what was in those boxes, but Tamika's secrecy made people start whispering. "Is she hiding something?" Sarah wondered, but then dismissed it, thinking she was imagining too much. Despite the unusual signs, no one thought Tamika could do anything terrible. In the eyes of the community, she was still a loving mother, albeit sometimes stressed. Jeremiah still appeared in adorable moments, the boy sitting in a high chair in the yard, eating cookies, or waving to passers-by. But behind the closed door of 1423, a storm was silently brewing. The pressure of single motherhood loneliness and secret relationships were pushing Tamika to a breaking point that even she didn't realize. In just a few weeks, on a September afternoon, everything would collapse. And when the truth emerged, it would shock all of Cascade Heights, making them wonder, how could they not have noticed what was happening right before their eyes? On the afternoon of September 15, 2024, in the Cascade Heights neighborhood, Atlanta, the weather was mild after a light rain. Droplets still clung to the oak leaves, shimmering under the faint sunlight. Inside the house at 1423 Oakwood Lane, everything seemed peaceful. Birdsong drifted through the air, and the scent of freshly cut grass from a neighbor's yard wafted through the window. But inside that red brick house, a horrific tragedy was silently unfolding with the slow tick of a time bomb. At 1:15 p.m., Tamika Johnson, 29, placed baby Jeremiah in his crib in the small first-floor bedroom. The 18-month-old boy with his tight curly hair and chubby cheeks was yawning after a lunch of formula and some cookies. Tamika drew the curtains, plunging the room into dim light. She leaned down, gently stroked his head, and whispered, "Sleep well, my love?" Jeremiah's eyes fluttered his hand, clutching his brown teddy bear. His even breathing mingled with the quiet stillness of the room. But when Tamika left the room, closing the door behind her, her face held no trace of gentleness. Her eyes were empty, as if she were battling a thought that even she feared. By 1:42 p.m., Tamika sat at the kitchen table, her hand gripping her phone tightly. She scrolled through messages, stopping at a conversation with a man named Dre. His last message, sent at 11:30 a.m., read, "You need to decide. I can't wait forever." Tamika bit her lip, her fingers trembling on the keyboard, but didn't reply. She stood up, opened the kitchen cabinet, and took out a small amber bottle. It was prescription cough syrup that the doctor had given Jeremiah when he had a cold a few months ago. But today, she didn't intend to use it for healing. She poured a large amount of syrup into Jeremiah's blue plastic cup, adding a little apple juice. The sweet, fruity smell masked the medicine's taste. She looked at the cup, took a deep breath, and walked back to the bedroom. At 2:03 p.m., Tamika sat by the crib, gently waking Jeremiah. The boy stirred his eyes half-closed, but obediently drank the cup of liquid his mother offered. "Drink it all, honey," she said, her voice even. Jeremiah took small sips, a few drops of apple juice trickling down his chin. When the cup was empty, he lay back down, his eyelids slowly drooping. Tamika sat there, watching her son sink into a deeper sleep than usual. Jeremiah's breathing slowed, almost imperceptible. For a moment, she paused as if to change her mind. But then she stood up, left the room, and closed the door without looking back. At 2:27 p.m., Tamika walked into the backyard, carrying a black trash bag and a pair of rubber gloves. Her backyard was a small plot of land surrounded by a wooden fence and dense bushes. No one could see her from there. She knelt near a corner of the fence where the ground was soft and damp after the rain. She began to dig small but decisive strokes of the shovel. Dirt splattered onto her old sneakers, the smell of damp earth mingling with the humid air. She dug a hole deep enough, about 2 feet, then stopped panting. She went back into the house, into Jeremiah's bedroom. The boy lay motionless in his crib, his face peaceful, as if dreaming a sweet dream. But he was no longer breathing. Tamika wrapped him in a thin blanket, hugged him tightly one last time, then placed him in the trash bag. She tied the bag securely, carried it to the backyard, and placed it in the hole. Shovel after shovel of dirt fell, covering the black bag until the ground was flat. She covered it with a few dry branches and fallen leaves as if nothing had ever happened. At 3:14 p.m., Tamika returned to the house, removed her gloves, and washed the shovel clean under the outdoor faucet. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at her face. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears. She brushed her hair, changed into a clean shirt, then sat down on the living room sofa. She texted Dre, "Done. Can you come over?" There was no reply. She looked around the room, her gaze settling on the empty crib in the bedroom. A suffocating feeling washed over her, but she shook her head as if to ward off all thoughts. She picked up her phone, took a deep breath, and dialed 911. At 4:37 p.m., Tamika's voice trembled over the phone. My child is missing. Please help me." She sat huddled on the sofa when the police arrived, her hands covering her face, sobbing uncontrollably. Officer Daniel Harper entered, taking notes on her statement. The house was still clean, with no signs of disturbance. The faint smell of baby formula hung in the air, and an unused diaper lay on the kitchen counter. But on the floor near the sofa, a tiny dry mud stain, something no one noticed, was the only sign of the crime that had just occurred. Jeremiah wasn't missing. He had never left the house. And in that moment, as Tamika cried for help, she knew the truth better than anyone. The crime was complete, but her play had just begun. On the night of September 15, 2024, the Cascade Heights neighborhood, Atlanta, was engulfed in tension. The flashing lights of police cars flickered on Oakwood Lane, illuminating the anxious faces of neighbors gathered on the roadside. The house at 1423, where Tamika Johnson was crying about her son Jeremiah's disappearance, became the center of attention. But in the darkness, a woman stood silently on the opposite porch, her hands gripping the railing, struggling with a decision that could change everything. It was Sarah Mitchell, 34, a bank employee and mother of two who had witnessed something that kept her from sleeping. Sarah wasn't the type to pry into her neighbors' affairs. She lived a busy life, dropping her children off at school in the morning, cooking in the afternoon, and watching Netflix with her husband in the evening. But ever since Tamika and Jeremiah moved in 2 years ago, Sarah had always felt sympathy for the single mother. She had once brought cookies over when Tamika first moved in, and they had talked about the difficulties of raising young children. "She seemed strong, but I knew being a single mom wasn't easy," Sarah later told the police. However, in recent months, she began to notice unusual things. Jeremiah's prolonged crying at night, Tamika's tired appearance, and especially the strange man who often visited the house late at night. But Sarah kept silent. "Everyone has their own business," she told herself. "I don't want to interfere." That afternoon, around 2:15 p.m., Sarah was standing at her kitchen window washing dishes after lunch. From there, she could see Tamika's backyard, where the wooden fence didn't completely block the view. She briefly saw Tamika walk out, carrying a small shovel and a pair of rubber gloves. Sarah thought she was going to garden, though it was a bit strange, since Tamika rarely tended her lawn. But what made Sarah stop letting the water overflow the dishes was Tamika's next action. She knelt near the fence, began to dig, each shovel stroke quick and decisive. Sarah frowned, wondering, what is she doing? Planting a tree. But there was no tree, no flower pot, just Tamika and a hole that grew deeper and deeper. Sarah was about to turn away, but a feeling of unease held her back. About 20 minutes later, Tamika returned to the house, then came back out with a black trash bag, which she placed in the hole. She covered it with dirt, tamped it down, and then scattered dry leaves over it. Sarah felt her heart pounding. "It's probably just trash," she reassured herself, but her hands trembled as she dried the dishes. When news of Jeremiah's disappearance spread later that afternoon, Sarah stood in the crowd of neighbors listening to Tamika cry to the police. She wanted to believe she had misunderstood, that the black bag was just trash, that Tamika truly didn't know where her son was. But the image of Tamika digging the hole haunted her. That evening, as the officers left and the neighborhood fell silent, Sarah sat in her living room watching her 2 children playing on the rug. She couldn't stop thinking about Jeremiah, about his gummy smile when she waved from the fence. Her husband, Michael, noticed her unusual behavior. "What's wrong, Sarah?" he asked. She recounted what she had seen, her voice trembling. Michael frowned. "Are you sure? If you speak up and you're wrong, it'll be big trouble. Tamika is his mother. She can't—" He trailed off, but his eyes showed clear suspicion. Sarah knew the cost of speaking out. Cascade Heights was a close-knit community where people trusted each other. If she was wrong, she would be seen as a slanderer, ruining the reputation of a grieving mother. Furthermore, she understood the complexity of a white person like herself reporting a black person like Tamika. "I didn't want people to think I was trying to cause trouble because of her race," Sarah later confessed. But the image of the black bag, Jeremiah's cries on previous nights, and Tamika's empty eyes when talking to the police made it impossible for her to remain silent. "If I don't say anything, and the boy is really in danger, I'll never forgive myself," she told Michael. Finally, he nodded. "Do what you think is right." At 10:22 p.m., Sarah called the Atlanta Police Department asking to speak with the officer in charge of Jeremiah's case. Daniel Harper, the white officer with a stern face, returned to the neighborhood 30 minutes later. Sarah met him on her porch, her voice quiet but firm. She recounted what she had seen Tamika digging the hole, the black bag, and how she covered everything up. Harper took notes, his eyes sharp. "Are you sure about the timing and details, Ms. Mitchell?" he asked. Sarah nodded, though her heart pounded. "I don't know what it was, but it didn't feel right. Jeremiah is just a child." Harper nodded, thanked her, but revealed nothing more. As he left, Sarah stood at the door watching the lights in house number 1423. She felt as if she had opened a door that could not be closed. In that moment, Sarah did not know that her words had changed the entire direction of the investigation. The detail about the black bag and the hole in the backyard was the first piece of the puzzle that led the police to the horrifying truth. In just a few hours, they would return to Tamika's house, not to look for a missing child, but to confront an unimaginable crime. Sarah, with a mix of courage and fear, had become an accidental witness, opening the door to a truth that all of Atlanta would never forget. On the morning of September 16, 2024, a faint dawn light covered the Cascade Heights neighborhood, Atlanta, but the atmosphere remained as heavy as the night before. The house at 1423 Oakwood Lane, where Tamika Johnson reported her son Jeremiah missing, was now the scene of an intense investigation. Following Sarah Mitchell's testimony about seeing Tamika digging a hole in the backyard, the Atlanta Police Department mobilized its criminal investigation unit and a forensic team. Officer Daniel Harper, a white officer with 12 years of experience, led the case, determined to uncover the truth behind Tamika's contradictory story. At 6:45 a.m., a forensic truck pulled up in front of Tamika's house. Officers, all white, cordoned off the backyard area, stretching yellow caution tape around the wooden fence. Neighbors began to gather, whispering anxiously. Tamika stood on her porch, arms crossed her eyes, avoiding Harper's gaze as he announced, "We have a search warrant, Ms. Johnson. You have the right to remain silent according to your Miranda rights." Tamika nodded, her voice small. "I don't understand what's happening. I just want to find my son." But Harper noticed her hands tremble slightly, and she kept glancing towards the backyard. The forensic team began digging in the corner of the yard where Sarah had indicated. After only a few minutes, a forensic specialist, Lisa Bennett, touched something soft beneath the soil. She stopped calling Harper. "Something's here." They carefully cleared away the dirt, revealing a tightly tied black trash bag. No one spoke, but the air seemed to freeze. When the bag was opened, inside was the body of baby Jeremiah, still wrapped in a thin blanket, his face peaceful, as if asleep. A young officer turned away, trying to suppress a sigh. Harper looked at Tamika, who was standing a few feet away, her face pale. She didn't cry, only pursed her lips, her eyes empty. The body was taken to the Fulton County Medical Examiner's office for an autopsy. The preliminary results stunned the investigation team. Jeremiah died of drug poisoning with a large amount of codeine, an ingredient in prescription cough syrup, in his blood. This dosage was enough to cause respiratory failure in an 18-month-old child. There were no signs of violence, no scratches or broken bones. The boy didn't resist at all, Dr. Susan Carter, the medical examiner, concluded. He fell asleep and didn't wake up. In Jeremiah's bedroom, police found a blue plastic cup with apple juice residue and traces of codeine. The cough syrup bottle in the kitchen cabinet was partially empty, and Tamika's fingerprints were on both the cup and the bottle. Security camera footage from the neighbor's house across the street provided further clues. Footage from 2:03 p.m. on September 15th showed Tamika walking into the backyard with a shovel and gloves, then returning with a black trash bag. No man appeared, debunking the theory that Dre, the person in Tamika's messages, was directly involved, but messages between them recovered from Tamika's phone revealed the pressure she was under. A message from Dre, sent on September 14th, read, "If you want to be with me, you need to deal with the kid. I'm not raising someone else's child." Tamika's last message sent before calling 911 was, "Done. Can you come over?" Dre did not reply. At 11:30 a.m., Tamika was taken to Atlanta Police Department headquarters for interrogation. In a small room with gray walls and a metal table, she sat opposite Harper and Detective Emily Collins, a white woman with sharp eyes. Harper began, "Ms. Johnson, we found Jeremiah in the backyard. Do you want to explain?" Tamika bowed her head, shaking it slightly. "I don't know. I didn't do anything." Collins placed a photo of the plastic cup on the table. "Your fingerprints are on this cup. The codeine in it killed your son. You mixed it, didn't you?" Tamika remained silent, her hands clasped tightly. Harper continued, "We have camera footage of you digging the hole. You've been lying from the start. Tell us the truth, Tamika. You owe Jeremiah that." After 20 minutes of evasion, Tamika's voice broke. "I didn't want to kill him. I just wanted him to sleep, so I could think." She recounted, her voice trembling. "Dre didn't want Jeremiah. He said if I kept him, he would leave. I was tired. I didn't know what to do. I mixed the medicine thinking he would just sleep for a long time." She paused, covering her face. "When I saw he wasn't breathing, I panicked. I didn't want anyone to know. I thought if I buried him, I could say he was missing." Harper asked, "You did it all yourself? Was Dre there?" Tamika shook her head. "No, just me. He didn't come, even though I did everything for him." Police summoned Dre, real name Marcus Andrews, 28, for questioning. He admitted urging Tamika to deal with Jeremiah, but denied instigating murder. "I just said I didn't want to raise someone else's kid," Andrews said. "I didn't tell her to do this." Phone data confirmed he was far from the scene at the time of the crime. However, police held him for investigation of incitement. The moment of confrontation came at 3:47 p.m. when Harper showed Tamika the video from the neighbor's camera. She watched herself digging the hole on the screen, her face pale. "That's when we knew," Harper later recounted, "she had no more room to deny it." Tamika collapsed onto the table, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm not that kind of mother. I love Jeremiah. I just wanted to live to be loved." But her belated confession could not change the truth. She had killed her son and concealed the crime with a fake 911 call. The case moved to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, preparing for a grand jury. Tamika was held without bail, facing a charge of first-degree murder. Andrews was investigated, but there was not enough evidence to prosecute him. The truth had been revealed, but it left a haunting question for the investigation team and all of Atlanta. How could a mother go so far for a toxic relationship? Harper, leaving the interrogation room, looked at Jeremiah's photo on the table, silently thinking, "Justice will be served, but this boy should have been protected long ago." On June 12, 2025, the Fulton County Superior Court Hall in Atlanta was packed. Reporters squeezed into the back rows, cameras panning slowly across the stern faces of those in attendance. The case of Tamika Johnson, the 29-year-old mother who killed her 18-month-old son Jeremiah and concealed his body before calling 911, had shocked the entire nation. Today, after 9 months of investigation and litigation, the final verdict would be delivered. But in that courtroom, no one felt victorious. Justice might be served, but the pain of a child forever gone left an unhealing scar on the heart of the Cascade Heights community. Tamika, the black woman once remembered by neighbors for her radiant smile, now walked into the courtroom looking gaunt. Her head bowed, hands cuffed, she wore an orange prison jumpsuit, her curly hair disheveled. Opposite her was a photo of Jeremiah placed on the victim's advocate's table by his grandmother, Mrs. Clara. The photo showed Jeremiah grinning, holding a red balloon on his first birthday. Mrs. Clara, her eyes red-rimmed, sat in the front row, clutching the teddy bear Jeremiah once loved. Officer Daniel Harper, the white officer who led the investigation, stood in a corner of the room, his gaze thoughtful. He had witnessed many cases in his 12-year career, but this one still kept him awake many nights. The trial lasted 3 weeks with undeniable evidence. The forensic team presented the autopsy results. Jeremiah died of codeine poisoning from prescription cough syrup at a dosage many times higher than safe for children. The blue plastic cup with Tamika's fingerprints, the video from the neighbor's camera showing her digging the hole, and the testimony of Sarah Mitchell, who bravely spoke out, painted a clear picture of the crime. The prosecutor, Ms. Rachel Nguyen, argued, Tamika Johnson intentionally took her son's life, not in a moment of impulse, but with cold calculation. She chose a toxic relationship over an innocent child. The defense public defender, James Carter, admitted Tamika's actions, but emphasized her circumstances: a single mother under financial and psychological pressure, manipulated by her boyfriend, Marcus Andrews. "She is not a monster," Carter said. "She is a lost woman pushed to her limit." When the presiding judge, Judge Linda Brooks, asked Tamika for her final words before sentencing, she stood up, her voice hoarse. "I don't ask for forgiveness. I know what I did. Jeremiah was my everything, but I let the fear of losing a man overshadow my love for my son. If there's an afterlife, I only hope my son doesn't call me mother." Her words made Mrs. Clara burst into tears, and many in the courtroom bowed their heads. Judge Brooks delivered the sentence. Tamika Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder, receiving a life sentence without parole. Marcus Andrews, though not directly involved, was convicted of indirect incitement, receiving 7 years in prison. There was no applause or cheering. The courtroom fell silent. Only Mrs. Clara's sobs could be heard. The case did not close only in the courtroom. It left a profound impact on Cascade Heights and all of Atlanta. The neighborhood, once known for its friendliness, now carried a gloomy atmosphere. Neighbors avoided mentioning the house at 1423, which now stood abandoned with weeds growing wild in the backyard. Sarah Mitchell, who spoke out about Tamika's digging, became the center of attention. Some called her a hero, but she only shook her head. "I'm not a hero, I just did what was right. But I wish I had realized sooner." Sarah and her family faced criticism from some community members who accused her of causing trouble for a black mother. This reflected the simmering racial tensions in Atlanta, where legal issues are often viewed through the lens of race. The case also spurred changes in the community. The Cascade Heights Council organized workshops on mental health for single parents, emphasizing the importance of supporting those who struggle in silence. A scholarship fund named Jeremiah was established, helping underprivileged children in Atlanta get an education. Mrs. Clara, despite her grief, became an advocate for child protection programs, telling the press, "My grandson cannot come back, but I want to make sure no child has to suffer like he did." On social media, the case sparked intense debate. Some called Tamika a cold-blooded killer, while others expressed sympathy, arguing she was a victim of societal pressure and a toxic relationship. A psychologist, Dr. Maya Evans, wrote in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, "This case reminds us that motherhood does not automatically come to everyone. When a mother is not supported, not listened to, the consequences can be tragic." Tamika's story became the subject of a Crime Junkie podcast episode, attracting millions of listeners, and a documentary on Investigation Discovery, asking the question, how far could a mother go? Justice had been served, but the pain lingered. Daniel Harper, leaving the courtroom, held Jeremiah's photo in his hand, thinking of his own son, about the same age as the boy. "We found the truth," he told his colleague, "but we can't bring the boy back." Jeremiah's story is not just a case. It is a warning about unseen pressures, unspoken loneliness, and moments when one wrong decision can destroy everything. The scariest thing is not the killer who comes from the dark, but from the very people we trust the most. Sometimes it's the mother who brought us into this world.